Is it time?
Yes. It's the deep breath before the plunge.
Is there any hope, Gandalf?
There never was much hope. Just a fool's hope. The board is set. The pieces are moving.
RWBY Volume 8 is the installment that we've all been waiting for, ever since we first learned about the floating city of Atlas and all the wonders and crimes that it held within its borders. This is the city where Weiss's journey began. It is the city where Blake and Adam's arcs as villains had their genesis. It is the city that was meant to protect and inspire humanity. It is the city where Salem had to win in order to break the world of remnants. Volume 8 is the culmination of everything that came before in the series, and is the chapter where everything in the story changes. The question then remains, was Volume 8 a triumph, or was it a beautiful failure? Hi there everyone, Lars here from Camille's Harem, not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And my friends, this review has been a long time in the making. I've honestly been mulling it over ever since the finale about how I would approach this season. I've talked it over with friends and with other fans, going back and forth on what I liked, what I didn't, whether what I saw actually worked or if it flopped. It was a mess that I had to wade through and find out where I really stood. Because at the onset of this review, I had to stop a moment and think about what the goal of this volume was. Volume 8 is what I like to call a culmination moment. It serves as the point in the plot where many arcs, themes, world-building details, theories, characters, and more all come to a head. If done well, culmination moments are extremely rewarding and cathartic for the audience. But because these moments have so much to handle, they can be easily overbloated or done sloppily. Volume 8 is in its entirety a culmination moment, or rather a culmination season for RWBY. In this season, we get the downfall of General Ironwood and his city Atlas. Salem's endgame is confirmed, the destruction of the entire world. The Grimm are built up, and the fate of the Silver-Eyed Warriors is revealed. Cinder's backstory is finally made known to all of us, and the lore around Remnant and the relics is taken to new heights. There is honestly a lot going on that is awesome, and deservedly should get their own in-depth reviews and analyses because they were fantastic. But there's also a lot that doesn't measure up. The story and the characters regress in many instances, touting to almost blatant retcons of vital character moments and growth. Choices were made on the part of the writers that have me greatly worried for the future of the show, and other moments and characters were honestly wasted. This is the antithesis to a culmination moment, and those moments robbed the season of its overall triumph. And I hope to illustrate by the end of my review that these problems definitely show that they come through, and that these are things that will now have to be resolved in the near future of RWBY. To prevent this review from becoming an even greater meandering, pedantic catastrophe, I will focus my review on 3 specific areas in regards to Volume 8. The first is the story, the second is the characters, and the third is the controversies that are in this volume. I could touch on a ton of stuff, but the story is playing around with a lot of themes and a lot of setup and a lot of small reveals, and the evolution of world building and character ideas that the creators have been playing with for years now. It's all there. And, maybe someday we should just do a live stream or something like that so we can just go into full-on detail. But in this review, I really want to knuckle down and focus on some of the things that I believe had the biggest positive and negative impacts on the overall plot. As an author, I want to highlight what works and what doesn't, and hopefully other writers out there watching this review and watching this show will learn how to improve their own stories. So with that intro finally out of the way, let's dive into Volume 8's story. Picking up right where Volume 7 left off, Team RWBY and their allies are on the run from General Ironwood. Now enemies of the state, missing key members of their allies, cut off from all support, the teens have harsh choices to face. And this is to say nothing of the Grim army flying towards Atlas. It would be the perfect place to reflect on what they have done, what their choices have wrought. RWBY does bring this up when she's at the Schnee Manor, but by this time it's just rhetorical questioning and does not instigate any introspection that is of value to the characters. Instead, at the beginning, we get this forced fight dynamic between the characters, and the teams have to split up. And so thus we get the team of Jean, Ren, Oscar, and Yang fighting to protect the people of Mantle from the Grim, while RWBY leads Penny and the others on a quest to hijack Ironwood's global communication system and spread the word of Salem and the need for unity against her and the Grim. Now, aside from the rather forced fight between RWBY and Yang, this is a good move! I like that the teams are finally mixing up, forcing them to work together in different ways, and it brings out some great character moments. The introduction of the dreaded Hound as well was a ton of fun, and the fights with it are incredible and also really creepy. It was an excellent blend of the two, and I loved it. The fight for the two cities, Atlas and Mantle, are interesting. They're interesting to consider. This was a great, but however missed opportunity to return to a debate that is kind of introduced in the earlier seasons. Soldiers versus huntsmen. Atlas should have showed off how he could face off against this incredible threat in Salem's armies, but that it was the huntsmen that could take care of the people personally and be very versatile and very accommodating and inventive in how they fight. However, huntsmen are not soldiers or grand strategists that could take on an entire army, whereas the soldiers are able to do that, but the soldiers are prevented from really protecting and caring for the people. We have some very interesting pros and cons here, but this is never fully addressed. Furthermore, the battle was kind of frustrating. There were plenty of bottlenecks that could have been used against the Grim down in Mantle, forcing attrition on Salem's forces while the people could have been evacuated. And on top of that, we just didn't get enough of the fight scenes up in Atlas. There was some really great stuff, but it was just so quick that we never got the real sense of what was going on upstairs. But I have to admit that this volume was not written by people who understand large-scale battles. That is honestly something that takes a lot of time and a lot of research to fully pull off when writing such events. Salem's capture of Oscar was the best turning point for the early part of the season. The rescue operation really pushed the plot along and brought us some great moments with Hazel and Emerald. And the rematch with the Ace Ops was good and helped to level an uneven playing field between the two sides, which was a huge gripe of mine at the end of Volume 7. And when we look at General Ironwood's descent into madness, many have described it as cartoonish and bland. And I think that lies more in the fault of his immediate 180 turn at the end of Volume 7, which I will point out is totally the hero's fault. But from there, his fall in Volume 8 is arguably well handled, and he becomes a terrifying antagonist who slowly facilitates his own downfall and shoves everyone away. The writers intended for his fall to showcase that anyone could fall from grace if they make the wrong choices. And in my opinion, it works really well. My one complaint, though, is his obsession with using Mantle against the heroes. Deciding that the massive bomb, which was his trump card against the whale, is now going to be his trump card against RWBY was kind of a stretch, especially when he has so many more options available to him being in command of the military, and when the whale is taken out by Oscar/Ozpin, he still has a lot of resources on hand to really squeeze RWBY and her friends without having to resort to utter annihilation. I just thought that that was maybe a little too cartoonish. And speaking of options open to someone, why did Salem not use her Grim River more? This lady could have wiped out Atlas so quickly, but instead she toyed with her food, and it was a move that didn't match the rest of her intensity and sense of purpose that we see throughout the season. Overall, the many battles of the season actually were on point. The duels with the Hound were creepy and fun, like I've already said. The desperate fight against Salem genuinely had me at the edge of my seat. It was awesome to see magic versus semblances versus dust. That was cool. And the final fight with Cinder was entertaining. Except for one bit, but I'll get to that eventually. The Relic of Creation was amazing. It was a brilliant addition to the world's magic and world building. Ambrosius was a fun character, and his rules for building new things place necessary and clever limitations on a very OP power. And the way that the girls came up with the means of saving Penny using those limitations was incredible. It was very smart. But I do have to agree with Vex Viewer on how the ending was rather contrived in how the girls get everyone from Mantle and Atlas out to Vacuo. It was all meant to set up the cliffhanger. And yeah, it was fun in the moment, but watching it again, it didn't have quite the impact that I would have wished. And then everything ends with the heroes being plunged into darkness, everyone split up once again. And yeah, I know I'm leaving a ton out, but a blow-by-blow of the season would mean that we'd be here for hours. Honestly, I do like the way that the season went. It did the best it could with the rushed narrative that was presented in Volume 7, and it did the best it could with the runtime that it had. However, I will state again that if I were in charge, I would have split things up. I would have taken more time in Volume 7 to show us Atlas and Mantle, everything that's going on there, and I would have ended that season with Jacques Schnee being taken down. That would have been the climax. Volume 8 then would have been Salem's invasion of the city, ending with Penny turning into a human. I would have reshuffled some of the events so that way Volume 9 could then be a much more padded out, much more intense battle season that then really provides those culmination moments for all of the different characters as they fight against Salem and now against an Ironwood who has now fully descended into madness as he loses faith throughout the process of Volume 8. That would have been the approach I would have given it because I feel like a lot of the stuff in Volumes 7 and 8 were good, but just not given enough room to breathe and grow properly. Therefore, my greatest writing advice that I could give when looking at Volume 8 is that you need to take your time to completely develop your ideas within the story. I mean, it does depend on the size and complexity of the tale that you are telling, but RWBY, which has a massive cast, multiple plot lines and arcs, and a ton of stuff to resolve before going into the next volume, the writers should have spread stuff out more. I have heard the argument that that many shows don't have that kind of luxury. To that, I honestly say,
In those movies where they say, make my day, or I'm your worst nightmare, well, listen to this one. Rubber baby buggy bumpers.
You see, RWBY has a strong following that will remain and grow if the creators crank out quality material. And taking your time helps out a lot with that. If you don't think that you can stretch out a single day for all it's worth, then really you need to go and read a Dan Brown novel and see how he does it. Because it is possible to do that. It is very possible to draw out a sequence of events throughout an entire season. Ultimately, the audience will forgive you for taking your time to deliver a great story. However, they will not so easily forgive a rushed and ultimately inferior tale. But let's move on now and get down to the characters. This was the season of the villains. This was their time to shine. Salem and her forces finally get the development they so desperately needed. They were a delight to have on the screen, and they commanded many of the strongest moments in the entire season. The heroes had their moments as well, but the honest truth is that the heroes have not really progressed much since Volume 5. Volume 5 served as both a reset for the writers as much as a kind of quasi-culmination moment as well, and they really wrapped up a lot of the loose ends in Volume 6, kind of leaving a lot of the characters in RWBY in a weird state of limbo. And honestly, that's just the truth of the matter, and I will get more into that in just a second. But first, let's get back to the villains. I'm going to give a quick summary for what's going on with these villains right here, what is amazing about them that we get in this season. So let's start off first with Salem. There is nothing wrong with a mustache twirling, or perhaps ponytail twirling villain. Her aim is to have the gods destroy everything so she can finally die. And I love that we finally have confirmation about this because it just fits everything that we know about her. There doesn't need to be much character development for her because we do get to enjoy her demented relationship with her cronies and with Ozma, how she just treats everyone. It is a great reflection of the things that we learned back in the Lost Fable. And Volume 8 just builds on that. It was fantastic. And especially thinking about her demented relationship with Ozma. I mean, look at this hot mama getting ready to go all cougar on Oscar. It's both disturbing and sexy. Moving on. Cinder. Huzzah! We finally get backstory at long last. There are a lot of people who complained that her backstory was lackluster. My response to that is that her story is lackluster compared to what we've imagined it to be for all these years. Honestly, her backstory should have been presented much sooner. No argument there. However, her motivations in history perfectly match her vindictive, proud, greedy nature. The Cinderella who missed the ball, and her prince, so she has killed her stepmother to go and conquer the kingdom. This season shows her as the perfect foil to Ruby, and honestly, I loved it. Cinder was fantastic in Volume 8. We then get to have a look at Watts. This guy finally gets to cut loose. It was fun to see him manipulate everything around him to just bring down the entire kingdom of Atlas. And when he snapped at Cinder and told her to get over herself, that she needs to be worthy and not deserving of the maiden powers, was amazing. It was brilliant dialogue. And it revealed just how intellectual, just how smart and aware Watts is. Which makes it all the more shame that he gets wrecked by her. I mean, I personally didn't like his death the way he went out, though it was pretty intense, if I do say so myself. And it does make sense given Cinder's development this season and how vindictive and vengeful she is. I mean, it was a bittersweet ending for Watts. Like, it was a cool way for him to go, but I personally didn't want to see him die because this guy just had so much left to offer the story. Moving on. Neo. Precious as always, betrayed as we predicted, the perfect ice cream girl. Now, with Emerald, I really like how this girl finally wakes up to how she's been treated by Cinder this entire time. I would have liked it more if this had been built up a little more consistently throughout the seasons. I mean, Volume 3 gives us some great dialogue revealing their abusive relationship. Emerald breaking away from Cinder does my heart so much good, and it really allowed her to open up more, and we got so much personality now just oozing from Emerald. I love it. This has opened up the floodgates for some great character developments. And of course, with Mercury, because I just can't move on from Emerald without talking about him. I like how he is also having his own second thoughts. However, because he's been spirited away by Tyrion to Vacuo, we really don't get a lot from him, but it's clear that he's about to face some sort of crisis of conscience, and that is going to be a lot of fun to see. And Tyrion, this guy falls into the same mold as Salem. He's just pure evil, and that is perfect. He is quite literally her lapdog, and is just good at complimenting her own horrible ways of viewing the world. He's the guy who's meant for these grisly, disgusting missions in which people will be slaughtered in horrible ways to wreak chaos and confusion and mistrust throughout the kingdoms. Tyrion really is the perfect right-hand man for the mentality that Salem has, and we get that in this volume. He is a wonderful, despicable villain. And when we look at Hazel, I like how this man's story shows us the pointlessness of revenge. He was a good guy who wanted to avenge his sister, but he saw how powerless he was to get it when he went after Salem, and consequently directed his rage not at her, but then at Ozpin. But no matter the beatings that he could lay down at other people, he didn't feel good at all. Death and violence couldn't save his sister, couldn't bring her back, and it really brought no comfort to him. And learning the truth from Oscar about Salem and what her goals are brought out that brotherly mentality once again. Hazel died a hero and a tragic figure, and it fits everything we know of him, and I love the action that we got out of his final fight. My only question is, Hazel, how did you never figure it out beforehand that Salem just wanted to destroy everything? You're smarter than that. Now let's briefly talk about the other antagonists who are in this volume. First of all, James Ironwood. Like I said, I enjoyed his descent into madness. He was cruel and calculating, but what bothered me was that we didn't get any display of good military leadership from him, and his obsession with destroying Mantle just, once again, did not make much sense to me. That is what made him a cartoonish villain in the end, rather than the menacing threat that he should have represented throughout the entire volume. Then again, there is no denying that he was wonderfully voice acted. His dialogue is honestly really great, and I just love how cool and calm he is as he murders. So James Ironwood, it's like a 9 stars out of 10 for me. Now, the Ace Ops, their growth was inconsistent because there just wasn't enough time given to them. But it looks like Harry and Clover were more than just teammates, am I right? And Vine's death was sad, but it just, again, felt like the plot was demanding more deaths, and the potential destruction of Mantle was the perfect excuse to off him. Again, just not enough time was given to the whole team to really make these characters better than just decent mini-bosses to fight. That being said, again, their fight with Penny was fun to watch. And then we get Winter Schnee. Give this queen the promotion she deserves! Winter gets so much character development this volume, going from perfect soldier to a competent military commander to a conspirator, and finally transforming into a hero. When she told Marrow that she would still detonate the bomb inside the Grim Whale even if Weiss was inside, that was the right call to make. She is a lady who sees the big picture, and even though she is a loving older sister, she understands the sacrifices that need to be made in order to save humanity. Her discipline, her compassion, her conscience, and her ability to see the big picture make her the best maiden to date. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's discuss the heroes. This brings me no joy. I honestly mean it. It brings me no joy to tear into characters that I genuinely love. But Volume 8 did so little to properly develop them that it is a bit embarrassing. Volume 8 is a culmination moment within the series. It was supposed to have big conclusions, revelations, or progression for the heroes. And granted, we do get a lot of really good revelations, but only a handful of them really go anywhere. Only a handful of the main cast actually get a good culminating moment that feels cathartic and progressive within the story. And honestly, this made me go back to Volume 2 when Professor Oobleck asked the girls why they wanted to become huntsmen. That sequences of scenes within Volume 2 is a powerful moment of introspection and requires that the girls seek deep within themselves to discover why they do what they do. Why do they want to be huntsmen? The rest of the series should have been a narrative response and fulfillment to what they said back in Volume 2, and Volume 8 would have been the perfect moment to actualize all of those things. But, well, let's begin with our main girl, Ruby. It was good to serve Ruby some much-needed humility and a defeat. But that has to mean something. We needed to see her rise above it all and become the stalwart leader and warrior we know she can be. She does have some funny moments, and her fight with the Hound was great. And though I'm not a fan of how she leaped 2 bounds in logic to quickly connect the disappearance of Summer Rose to the Hound and the fact that there was a silver-eyed warrior, I mean, the connection does make sense, but within the moment, it just felt rather forced. And when Blake said that Ruby inspired her, that was a heartwarming moment. I liked it. But it needed to be followed up with Ruby delivering then as a leader in the fight with the Hound. However, that was down to Team Schnee for really pulling out the victory. And speaking of Schnees, Weiss, man. Weiss wanted to become a huntress in order to redeem the family name and get away from her abusive father. And she has succeeded in doing all of that, but really only to a certain degree. Weiss should have been the one to bring the family together, but it was Whitley who did that. Weiss was like Ruby and kind of just along for the ride, it felt. She has largely usurped Blake's role as the one who questions the team's decisions and looks out for the oppressed, which didn't really fit in with the trajectory that we were given for Weiss initially. And then we have Blake, possibly Yang's girlfriend. Blake was given nothing this season. The writers have no idea what to do with her when Yang isn't around. I'm sorry, but that's it. And how do they reward faithful Bumblebee fans? With a freaking head bump. No kiss, no confession, nada! Look, I would have been right there with you saying that close friends and warriors don't need to express what they already understand between them. But that was before Bleach. No ship is safe from sinking. And really, it's just pathetic because Blake was such a dynamic and interesting character, but they really haven't a clue what to do with her since Volume 5. The end of her arc was in facing down Adam and saying enough is enough. It wasn't in killing him. That was for Yang. And speaking of Yang, she did have some great moments this volume. I have to say that. There's some moments where we get to see the fun, bombastic, quippy Yang, and that is just great. But then the writers remembered that they made her angsty and hate authority figures for some inexplicable reason back in Volume 5, and when that Yang comes out to play, it's just bad. At least she has a personality and autonomy away from Blake, though her pining again results in a pathetic head bump. Nothing more. I wish that we had more of Yang away from the others, because at least then we get to see Yang doing something different and amazing. Or otherwise, guys, just commit on screen to Bumblebee and let it be done with. Please stop with the ship baiting. This is volumes 1 through 3 shenanigans. We're well beyond that now. And the girls are just now so far from the past that they chose back in Volume 2 that there is no good explanation for it. Ruby is not the leader or righteous hero that she should be. Yang's sense of adventure is practically non-existent now, and her development is inconsistent. Blake is no longer the intellectual revolutionary. Instead, she's the token fondness and love interest. And Weiss didn't save her family saved themselves, because she helped Ironwood arrest Jacques Schnee, and it was Ironwood who killed her father. Simply put, these girls are just far off the range from where their arcs pointed them, and this volume makes that abundantly clear. And their alternate destinations have not been enjoyable or necessary for the plot either. Just their mistakes and random bouts of stupidity have been what's really pushed the plot along since Volume 7. And if you want more about that, then yeah, go check out Vex Viewer's review of their endgame plan and other such things. In quick order, let's address some of the other heroes. Ren and Nora. I place these two together because their arcs are essentially now about falling in and out of love with each other in order to gain new powers. There is actually a lot of cool stuff here, but it is overshadowed by romantic drama that should have been teased out and resolved far earlier in the series. It feels like we are retreading the same waters from Volume 4, and that is what we call stagnation. Crow unfortunately spent this volume as a useless prisoner with one okay fight later on. He was seriously held back by Robin. Had we gotten a fight between him and Ironwood, that would have been such a great cathartic moment, and there is no denying that it would have been awesome. They've already shown that they can do so much with Crow and with Ironwood. Also, their ideologies needed to clash one more time. But frickin' Robin was useless this entire volume. She only existed for the excuse of the merry band of female thieves to help out Ruby and the gang in order to bring down Ironwood, and earlier to help catch Jacques. So again, this just devalues Weiss's contribution, which is honestly a shame because I wanted to like Robin. But she does nothing this entire volume except hold Crow back. Then we have Maria, lost in space for all I know. She could have been a great mentor from far away this season, speaking encouraging words to Ruby and helping her to cope with what was happening in this battle and to focus on using her silver eyes. But nope, we don't get that. Pedro Palladina, man, he had a great father moment atop the tower. And this was honestly really beautiful as he learned the lesson that all good dads have to learn, that you need to let go. This was good, and I enjoyed the parting between the two of them. It even got me a little emotional. Then let's address Oscar. This little guy gets some great stuff this season. It's good that he embraces Ozpin to a certain extent, who really helps him along and saves this little guy from going insane from the torture that he receives at the hands of Hazel. Hashtag Ozpin did nothing wrong. Oscar was able to reach Hazel and help him on a human level and redeem both Hazel and Emerald. Oscar is in a way becoming the de facto leader of the team, and he is making the sacrifices that make one a hero. We also have to consider how he and Ozpin are merging even more, and I wish we had gotten a clearer image of Ren reading Oscar's aura before bringing it up. However, I really have no complaints for Oscar at all because he was awesome this volume, and I look forward to his continued growth throughout the rest of the series. And Jean, though largely relegated to the background throughout the volume, it is great to see him again acting in the role of tactician. He is the guy who can come in clutch when it's necessary, lead from the front, and fight hard. He is one of the few characters who has been living up to his character arc consistently throughout the entire series. And it was great to see his ingenuity win out once again while protecting the people of Mantle. And I'll get that bit to him and Penny here when I talk about the controversies. So finally, let's bring up Penny. This sweet cinnamon roll was taken from us once again, but it was great while it lasted. She was funny. She brought the real heart to the season. She underwent tremendous growth as a character and made the ultimate sacrifice to save everyone. Penny was a hero, and I loved watching that. As you can then see, this volume had a ton of characters, and there were far more than just these. Again, timing is essential to fully develop everyone within your story. By the end of this volume, my heart should have been aching for the tragedies that befell so many of the cast members. But because this volume gave so little time to them, the culmination was rushed, sloppy in some cases, and missing crucial details in others to showcase the meaning and heart behind every single character. A story lives or dies by its characters. Sure, volumes 1 and 2 were choppy, but they had such amazing characters in them that we didn't care. We kept on going through because we wanted to spend more time with them, and that brought us into the amazing Volume 3. Volume 8 did not have that kind of strong cast in spades as the previous volumes did. And as a result, the overbloated and high-vaulted nature of this season bogged down the plot's progression unless it went at a breakneck pace. And without the dynamic characters, I was often left to wonder why any of this stuff really mattered. If your audience ever feels this way, then you're doing it wrong. And again, never sacrifice your characters in favor of the plot. It can be hard to strike a good balance, but it's necessary if you want your story to succeed. Remember, a story lives or dies by its characters. Finally, let's discuss the controversies contained within this volume. This will include some theories and other things that we should consider when moving on towards Volume 9. I will also be addressing my theory about Pure returning because there are yet more breadcrumbs to follow. Okay, alright, let's just get into it already. Why in the name of the Brothers Grimm did they kill Penny off right after making her a human? Look, I get why they killed her off, and I even agree with the powers going to Winter, but come on, this was a horrible decision to make. What about all of her growth to becoming more human? It was just all so they could justify her making a choice to kill herself to prevent Cinder from getting the Winter Maiden powers. Ugh! No, 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 no. This is not how you do this. This was a freaking George R.R. Martin move, and it sucks when he does it too. It violently tore away all the catharsis. It destroyed so much of the progression. It was too quick, and it just wasn't nearly well set up enough. It was a mockery of everything that Penny went through, and all for a shock moment to ensure that Winter ended up with the powers. Okay, RWBY writers, you wanted to kill off Penny? Sure, awesome. Let's do that. Let me help you make it better. And guess what? Once again, the answer is time. You needed to make Volume 7 and 8 into 3 parts. Volume 8 should have ended with them turning Penny into a human as a high note to counter Salem's impending victory before slugging it out viciously in the 9th volume against her and General Ironwood. Penny needed time to enjoy her humanity. The team needed more time with the Staff of Creation. Penny needed far more on-screen time with Winter to fully establish their relationship and friendship. It would be better for both girls, showing how they are both worthy of the Maiden's powers. That they're not just deserving, but as Watt says, that they are worthy of them. It would have been a brilliant counter to the tirade that Cinder has when she's alone with Watts atop the roof. And honestly, human Penny was just too precious to tear away from us so soon. Honestly, doing that to us was mere cruelty and had no narrative strength to it. It was a massive misstep and was really self-defeating. And I'll tell you why we needed more time with human Penny. In the intro, we get a clear, though quick hint that Penny has 2 souls in her. Her reflection, like Cinder's, is inverted. Switching from machine to human comes with a lot of possibilities for exploring feelings and the weight and worth of a soul. We could have made some real headway with this clear clue about the Maiden's powers and the 2 souls. There's a lot of debate about whether the souls come with the transfer of the powers, if they are due to the result of Ruby's silver eyes, if it's physical contact, or something else that we're missing. And the writers have infuriatingly taken away a crucial puzzle piece to understanding the magic and supernatural subplots of this show. One could argue that this is wisely keeping back stuff for a cool reveal later on, but this quick murder feels like a retcon more than anything smart, and it makes the audience wonder if the writers even know what they're doing. So I would have kept Penny around for another season, using her powers, her smarts, and her new humanity to challenge Salem and Ironwood. This would give RWBY more time to rise from the darkness of this battle and become the hero and leader the show needs. And she and Penny could have played off of each other, giving us much needed levity. She could have even joined Jean and his team for a little while, completing Team Juniper for the first time in forever, and giving us really more interactions to justify Jean being the one to bring about Penny's ultimate demise, that she could really come to trust him on screen, and then that trust would culminate in having him be the one to kill her so she could give her powers to Winter. It's honestly a scene that makes sense, but it needed to be built up better. Taking the time to let Penny be human would have granted Volume 8's current ending the emotional weight necessary to not only hit us like a freight train, but to provide the catharsis to Penny's arc overall, that she was indeed the real girl, and that she truly mattered to everyone. And speaking further about the ending, the fight within the in-between space was interesting. I really liked how it played out, though I didn't like the fake-out deaths, starting with Yang getting thrown over the edge, followed by everyone else. I honestly felt nothing at the moment. I even scoffed out loud and paused the show and walked away to just vent off some of my frustration, because we've seen this before, going back to Volume 5, when all of Team RWBY disappeared into the void, followed by Jean, and then we were just left with a shot of the refugees facing Grimm and Vacuo, Atlas falling and being flooded in a strange island where the girls' weapons are. Man, it's an ending that just exists to fill us with dread and uncertainty. It's a replica, in a way, of Volume 3, only Volume 3 went the necessary step further and gave us a sense of hope and moving on by having RWBY team up with Jean, Nora, and Ren to continue the adventure. Volume 8 gives us none of that hope, leaving us crushed and confused. If you support the villains, this is a big win for you. And if you support the heroes, this volume's finale makes little sense and makes you wonder what the writers are trying to pull. I get it that the writers wanted a darker ending, and that's totally cool. They could have that. But by rushing Penny's demise like they did, the audience needed some kind of hope to follow up with such a horrible murder. Instead, we get nothing. I saw many fans take to social media and either denounce the show and leave the community, or say that they weren't sure if they could continue. And look, right here, these fan reactions are important because they lead into another issue that needs to be addressed in order to understand how the story could be affected moving forward. And yes, this takes us out of the story a little bit and to what's going on behind the scenes, but once again, this is essential to understand. Rooster Teeth, and by extension RWBY, are owned by Warner Media. But Rooster Teeth's background noise about being bought out by them and the discussions around that have distracted the fans from the most important thing about the show itself. It may be that Rooster Teeth and RWBY have certain limitations and set budgets for volumes 7, 9, and 8, and RWBY knew that they had to knock this volume out of the ballpark, but were working with only so much spread out over 3 volumes. And that already causes quite a few problems, to say nothing of the pandemic that landed right in the middle of all of this. However, they did work through it, and they worked really hard to score a rock-solid win for themselves and for the community. However, because of the way that the show ended, it left fans feeling bitter and unsure about moving forward. And yeah, you can chalk this up to, well, you can't please everyone, but the fact of the matter remains that fans are losing faith in the storytelling. Now, I'm fully confident that RWBY will carry on, but what will their funding be like? You see, they needed this win because with how everything is so crazy and janky behind the scenes, with companies being bought up and then being traded and so on and so forth, Rooster Teeth needs to show that it can bring its A game and bring in the money. RWBY is one of their money makers, and if RWBY can succeed, then it will continue on. It will get the funding it needs. It will push on through. The writers will have that stress alleviated from their shoulders, and they will be able to focus on cranking out a great story. And I know that they're announcing more RWBY content, like episodes for RWBY Chibi, Fairy Tales of Remnants, and new video games. This all sounds really great, but it is a lot of commitment and pressure on the crew. That kind of pressure has harsh effects on the creative mind. And if there's all of this craziness going on in the background because Volume 8 didn't deliver, this will just make the creators suffer even more. And I don't want to see main RWBY suffer because I do enjoy the series. I would not be sticking out for all of these seasons, cranking out who knows how many videos by now on the subject, if I didn't care. I have not helped my friends build up Camille's harem to where it is today by spending my time lambasting RWBY like others. No, I want to take a very creative and honestly positive and building up approach to this show, but I need to be honest at the same time. Now, within the show, with so much up in the air, coming back to the story, the island that Team RWBY is on with Jean and Neo could be the afterlife, but I'm personally far more confident that it's a previous creation of the gods, because Ambrosius is the spirit of creation and mimics their powers. This is probably one of their former experiments before creating Remnant. And I say this because now that we have confirmation that Salem is out to destroy the world, we need to know more about the potential of these harbingers of doom, the gods, the brothers. We need to learn more about them, and this is the perfect setup for it. And I'm honestly not upset where the heroes are at the moment. I'm just annoyed about how we've gotten here and that we don't see them taking in this new world and moving forward. Give us something to work with. Give us that positivity. Give us that hope as we move on into Volume 9. That is what Volume 9 needs. Volume 9 needs to be an injection of hope and a chance for the characters to move on. A culmination moment is, in a way, kind of a reset moment where it's like, okay, now that we've wrapped up all of these other points, we can now move on with the story in the same old direction or in a new direction. Volume 9 is supposed to give us that, but there is a lot that it has to now labor under, as I'll get into just a little bit here in a second. However, I do need to address Pyrrha's potential returning, because after this volume, I'm even more confident in my theory, which, if you haven't watched it, I'll provide a link for it down in the description. Essentially, Pyrrha's soul is inside Cinder, and we get even more evidence of this with Cinder's aura changing in color, her breakdown before Watts, and acting even more like Pyrrha for a moment, and far less like Cinder, or at least the Cinder that we know. I mean, she even says sorry to Neo for not upholding her end of the bargain, and the way that she delivered it was really Pyrrha-like too. Furthermore, Penny's reversed reflection proves that this transferal of souls does exist. And Jean being stuck now with Team RWBY in a place where they can learn more, potentially about the gods, is a perfect opportunity to bring up Pyrrha again. But after the unceremonious slaughter of Penny and the way that was rushed and barely set up, I'm honestly fearful of them bringing back Pyrrha. Would they just do that to kill her off again? I mean, Phoenix Knight champions this possibility, but I personally disagree, because going through so much effort to bring her back only just to kill her again would be a huge waste. But Penny's death has shaken my confidence. I don't want to see Best Girl come back merely to have her die again in the next episode, like what they did to Penny after she gained her humanity. Character resurrections are tricky and need to be handled well. They need to be handled very consciously of what you're doing and what your story has provided to you, and really what kind of consequences come in the wake of a character's death. Penny's return was good in Volume 7 because it addressed so much of this, and I liked everything that we got from Penny until we got to the very end of her story, because her death was just too quick and right on the heels of such a valuable and crucial moment for her as a character. And clearly, it will be a while before we get to see Pyrrha's return. So this needs to be handled wisely, as I have outlined in my previous videos on this subject. Honestly, this is a sticky situation to find ourselves in. And overall, the ending of the volume is unbalanced. It's weighted down by Penny's death and the lack of any hope for the audience. The feeling overshadows so much of the good that this volume accomplished. Its ending leaves us with more questions than answers, and it leaves so much open that nothing feels resolved. As a result, the show remains overburdened and ready to slump under more and more narrative and character weight. It makes me concerned, especially for Volume 9, which could suffer from the sins and faults left over from Volumes 7 and 8, which the show does not need. There's so much going on with not enough resolved and not enough time that it could make future volumes feel even more rushed, because there's just so much going on. Ultimately, this brings me back to the necessity and importance of culmination moments within your stories, especially for longer running tales. Culmination moments are there in larger stories to bring resolutions to the characters and subplots that you've sprinkled throughout the series, and the catharsis for your audience to keep them engaged and everything moving forward. And Volume 8 failed in that regard. I intend to illustrate this hopefully better in a future video, but this one is already waxing over long, so I'm really just going to move forward now because yeah, I mean, how long has it already been? Yeesh. In conclusion, Volume 8 perfectly represents the idea that a great concept does not a great story make. It's important to highlight the need to balance the story between plot and characters. It perfectly illustrates the need to take your time to develop a story and balance your large cast with the sweeping plot lines. If that means altering the plot for better character moments, then do it. For example, even though I really do like General Ironwood's turn to villainy, it took up a fair amount of the plot. Instead, you could have left his character alone as the headmaster of Atlas, working with Team RWBY and ultimately dying a hero's death to defend his school to the bitter end, and learning to grow a heart, finally caring for the people of both Atlas and Mantle. Yes, it would have been more conventional and boring to go this route, but it would have offered you more time to do the other things that you want to do, because you still have the Hound, Amity Arena, Salem's Invasion. That was also going to happen whether or not Ironwood was evil. This volume was a moment that the creators have been looking forward to since Volume 1. And honestly, I'm happy that we got this far. But even they admitted that this volume was already bursting at the seams. So in the future, it's better to allow yourself a little breathing room and be maybe more streamlined. That, or you can take my constant suggestion of take your time and spread things out even more. I know that that's difficult, especially right now with the uncertainty that Rooster Teeth is facing, but I feel like that's the better route to go. However, all of that being said, I hope that Volume 9 will be great. And I hope even more that the creators learn from their mistakes before it's too late. So, now I'm going to pick myself up with some real RWBY wholesomeness.
The people here are the coolest. No offense to you guys.
None taken.
Okay, they're just in here. I'm really excited for you to meet them, so be cool, okay?
And since Atlas is part of Mantle, my repair time only lasts one turn. Pretty sneaky, sis. But you just activated my trap card. Giant Nevermore! Yes, fear the almighty power of my forces. Cower as they pillage your homes and weep as they take your children from your very arms. Trap card. Huh? Your armies have been destroyed.
Justice will be swift! Justice will be painful! It will be delicious!
Anyway, in the meantime, I might suggest that you get invested in some truly great shows. Shows like The Owl House and Amphibia. And we coincidentally have some great analyses and review videos for those shows, so please feel free to check them out. We also have more videos and podcast episodes with writing advice and insights for all you authors out there. We have a Discord server open as well for discussions and support in all your writing endeavors. Please feel free to check us out and use us as a resource in your own writing. And honestly, at the end of this long review, I want to thank you for sticking around. Thank you for joining us on this RWBY stretch in our adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.